President Obama is being candid about the importance of the Latino vote in his re-election.
Yeah, and we told you about the interview that he gave to the Des Moines Register. The White House asked for it to be off the record, but after the newspaper's editor complained, the administration gave the go-ahead and the paper released the transcript. This paragraph jumped out to us. The president said, quote, "I will just be very blunt. Should I win a second term, a big reason I will win a second term is because the Republican nominee and the Republican Party have so alienated the fastest growing demographic group in the country, the Latino community."
Yeah, when the president said that, he thought he was speaking off the record, but it became on the record. Let's talk about the racial, ethnic divisions in this election. Right now, we're joined by three CNN senior analysts. Ron Brownstein is joining us, our political contributors, Roland Martin and Alex Castellanos.
They're more senior than me. I'm the younger one.
The junior Roland Martin.
So they could take care of you.
You saw the most recent NBC News Wall Street Journal Telemundo poll. Likely Latino voters' choice for president, 70% for President Obama, 25% for Mitt Romney. If it stays like that, Romney's probably not going to be elected.
It makes it tough. But fortunately, Ohio has one of the smallest Latino populations, voting populations of any of the important and determinative swing states. And right now, Romney's in pretty good shape in a lot of those other swing states. But, you know, Republicans have paid a price for the primary process that they went through. George Bush, open arms to, I think, a more open stance toward immigrants and to the Hispanic population. We haven't seen that in this Republican Party. Now, the good news, Marco Rubio, Susana Martinez, there's another generation coming, but it's not going to get, the cavalry's not going to arrive in time for this
Roland
election.
itching to get into.
Wolf, during one of the CNN debates in the GOP primary, I will never forget a question from Twitter. The question was, what would you do as candidates to attract Latinos to the GOP? That was the question, a softball. The answer was build a wall. And I'm sitting at home going, did any of them actually hear the question? It was a softball question, and they all reverted to building a wall. And I emailed Matt Barretto, who runs Latino Decisions, one of the polling deals, and he said, what were they thinking? It was a softball question. They couldn't even answer that question.
One of the core dynamics in politics is the future doesn't have a vote in the room. The Republicans, the senior strategists in the party, from Alex to Karl Rove to Ed Gillespie, they all recognize they have to do better with Hispanics over the long run, or else they're going to have a very hard time competing to win a national majority, largely because of the weakness among Hispanics. Mitt Romney has to get to 61% among whites, which means he could run as well among whites as any Republican challenger ever, as well as Eisenhower in 52, Reagan in 80, or Bush in 88, and still lose. The problem is the current coalition is so heavily dependent on the votes of older and blue-collar whites who are the most ambivalent and resistant in many ways to the demographic and racial change going on. And so there is very little leeway for the party to move in a way that most strategists believe they have to try to court that Hispanic vote.
And let me ask you just about that. Take a look at how President Obama's support broke down in 2008. You have, among white voters, 43%. 55% for John McCain, African-American voters 95%, and Latino voters 67%.
Right. And, you know, look, this is a rapidly changing country.
Well, and you even wrote in a recent column that the white voters is a problem. Potential problem for President Obama. How big of a problem is it?
We have mirror image weaknesses in the parties. I mean, first of all, in 2008, Barack Obama became the first candidate ever to lose whites by double digits and win. And he was able to win because minorities are now 26% of the total vote, more than double what they were when Bill Clinton was first elected, and he won a combined 80% of them. If he wins a combined 80% of them again, which he seems to be on track to do, largely because of the Hispanic strength, and they represent at least 26% of the vote, he can win a national majority with only 40% of whites. The problem is he may not be able to get there. In some polls, he is below 40% of whites, and which says that we have kind of mirror image weaknesses of the parties. Democrats are having trouble holding whites, Republicans minorities.
Although you have to examine that 40%.
Take a look at these numbers while we're continuing this conversation of likely voters, their choice for president. Look at the racial breakdown right there.
This is the most recent poll we have. This is the Washington Post ABC News poll. 40% right now white voters for President Obama, 57% for Mitt Romney. There was another poll on NBC News poll that came out earlier in October that had President Obama rolling with only 37% of the white vote.
But it's also where are those white voters in terms, because obviously you saw with the strong folks with the Tea Party coming out, largely whites, very few minorities in the Tea Party movement, and so you look at where the white voters in the battleground states. Iowa. Ain't that many Hispanic and white and black folks in Iowa. I was just in Des Moines on Saturday. New Hampshire, exact same thing. But even people said that Obama couldn't get blue-collar workers. Look what's happening in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Absolutely. And so I understand 40%, but in the states he needs, Yep. He is actually doing better among those white blue-collar workers than expected.
Let me just ask this question, though. If you look at that 37% in one poll, 40% when talking about white voters for President Obama, what is the problem, though? Even if it's not in key states, what's the problem?
Why is he getting such a relatively small percentage of the white vote?
I think for a couple of reasons. I think it has very little to do with race because the country has not changed that much, and neither has the race of the President of the United States in the past 4 years. But an economy collapses, who does it hit? It hits the white working class very hard. We've seen that white working men. Yeah, but it hits.
Argue that blacks and Hispanics are hit
actually have a higher unemployment rate than whites.
And but blacks are staying solid for Obama.
No Democrat has won a majority of white votes since Lyndon Johnson in 1964. Essentially, we have seen a generation-long process in which much of the white electorate, especially that white working class, has grown skeptical the government will ever do anything that benefits them. For example, very dubious of the health care law. But as Roland correctly pointed out, the one big exception to this pattern right now is the critical last line of defense for President Obama in this race, which today is running much better among working class whites in the upper Midwest than anywhere else. In that Time poll that came out today in Ohio, he's at 42% among non-college whites, compared to most, about 35%.
That might be a saving grace.
The auto bailout and the case against Bain has had more resonance with whites in the upper Midwest than anywhere else, and that right now is kind of the thin line that is keeping Barack Obama afloat in this race.
The census projection that came out a little while ago, that minorities right now are expected to be the majority in the year 2042. Hold your thought for a moment. We have a lot more to talk about.